Hello, in today's episode we are going to be coloring in this heart-shaped stone in a pile of leaves and roses. I've just finished, so we'll go back and rewind. Some key things here are that these are mostly gray tone markers, so this is green grays, red grays, cool gray, warm gray, with a little bit of a normal color mixed in. So it's 80% gray with a little bit of a normal color mixed in. That was kind of my goal, so I hope you enjoy. Let me know what you think in the comments, if you have questions, comments, concerns, and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Fade the PB8. In this episode, we'll be doing this stone heart that's kind of in a bed of flowers and some leaves. And for this drawing, I want it to be more of a grayscale. So what I've done is I've selected my greens. I tend to like to work the backgrounds a little bit first, and I want to work these leaves because I'm not really sure how green they're going to be, like how gray versus how green they're going to be. So if you look at this swatch over here, these are kind of my grays right here, and I'm going to start with these. Then I selected some greens over here, but actually at first I realized that these might be a little bit too bright or too dark, too dominant. So I grabbed two lighter ones, and I'm going to kind of work those ones in after I do the green grays. So when I do this, I want to I've got like different lighter ones. I'm going to always start with my light marker, but I'm going to kind of do it sporadically. And I'm just going to kind of, I'm working on getting the paper wet per usual. Coming in. Just doing different leaves. I'm gonna go over with the different types of green, different green grays. So like I've got like a few light ones, and I'm gonna kind of mix them in together, and then I'll go to the medium ones. And I'm just kind of getting the paper wet. And I really don't know exactly what I want. Like sometimes, like when I do these drawings, like I have like a vision in mind. But sometimes things look a little bit differently, like once the ink hits the paper. And that's kind of what I'm doing right now. Like normally I pick out my entire palette for the entire thing before I even get going. But in this case I just did it for the greens because I kind of want to see what these leaves are going to look like before I start jumping into like the roses and the stone heart. So kind of just randomly putting down this green. Picking some leaves here and there. And I think this is a really good place to start. We always start with the lighter markers, and we kind of work our way to the darker ones. And as we do that, with each layer, each time we come with new markers, we go one step darker and darker. Well, we get the paper a little bit wetter, a little bit more damp. And when the paper is damp, we want that because that helps us blend. We have wet ink on the paper, and you're putting new ink down, and you're literally mixing it together on the paper itself. Unlike, say, paint, where you might mix it on like a separate palette and then come apply it later. So we're actually changing the color on the paper itself. So let's go with that light green. I'm going to go with this light green now, and just kind of work some of the other leaves. You can see it's a slightly different tone. So like my goal right now is to have each leaf be like a slightly different color. A lot of these we're going to come back to, and we're going to kind of mix in the same colors and whatnot. But my goal off the bat is to get the paper wet and kind of start to get some variety of colors going. Just like very, very small changes from one green to another. I mean, these two green grays are very, very similar, but if you look carefully, they're clearly different. So when you're working with a large area like this, I'm doing all these different leaves. I'm jumping around from one to another kind of randomly. Well, time is important when you're doing with alcohol markers. The ink starts to dry as soon as it hits the paper, right? So we want to kind of keep going over it and try to keep the ink slightly damp. We don't want to go terribly wet because then you could kind of bleed, and you might even damage the paper, really. But there's kind of this happy medium between being totally dry and being completely saturated. And we are going to try to find that. So when I'm working with these large areas, kind of jumping around, I'm not too worried about oversaturating the paper. it's just going to take me too long to go from one leaf to another. So I'm still kind of working in these lighter greens here. I can come over some colors that some leaves that I've already done. That's no big deal. We're just mixing all the colors, getting the paper wet. Yeah, I think this is a good idea to start with the green grays. And I'll finish up with the green grays first. So sometimes you might want to, like, if you're doing two different kind of palettes together, like the grays with the greens, you might want to kind of jump back and forth, like start with the really light gray, then the really light green, then the medium light gray, then the medium light green, and so on and so forth. But in this case, I think I'm going to do everything in gray first, and then I will add some of these greens, because I want it to be mostly gray. Mostly gray. Touch of real color. But, yeah, mostly gray. Get all these couple leaves here at the bottom that I missed. So my light source is going to be to my upper right. I'm right-handed, so I usually have my light source just kind of from my upper right. If you're left-handed, it makes more sense to have it in the left-hand corner. I'm not entirely sure why, but 9 times out of 10, my light source is in the upper right-hand corner, and this picture will be no exception. So, working in all these different greens here. All right, I'm gonna come back to the original one and just kind of get some of these, more of these leaves a little bit wet, and just kind of mix in a few more. So I'm still in this very light green gray right now. Just trying to, like, I'm in an experimental stage. Like, I'm in the very early stages. We're going to be applying darker markers, and those darker markers are going to take away mistakes that we make. So right now, like, I'm kind of easy sailing. Like, I can really mess around with these lighter colors and not really worry about ruining the picture, because we can always come back with a darker color. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So, let's see here. Just kind of working with different leaves. So each leaf is going to be like a slightly different color, because it's different combinations of the different green grays. Yeah, I think this looks real good. Get the stem of the bulb. For the background, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do up here. Like, I could do like a sky blue. I'm going to save that for later. Down here, I might do like a dirt. Kind of make it look like we're in a dirt patch. I'm not entirely certain yet. Right now, I'm just kind of focused on the leaves. And that's really kind of uncharacteristic of me, honestly. Like I said, I usually pick out my palette for everything beforehand. But sometimes you just got to make decisions on the go. And that's exactly what I'm going to be doing here. Okay, I think that's good for this green, for these lighter ones. All right, let's step it up. Let's go to kind of like the middle, kind of lighter middle tier. And with these colors, I'm going to start, whenever you add a darker color, you always want to go kind of like the dark. You just want to find like a really dark spot and start there. So I'm going to kind of come like in these shadowy areas where I'm pretty sure that it's just going to be really dark in the end result. So basically where I'm adding the ink right now, it's probably going to end up being even a darker green than this. So let's see, I can kind of come underneath, create some shadows from this flower. So let's just start there. Let's just start with areas we know are going to be really dark, and just add shadow. Let's start with the really dark areas and kind of work our way to the later ones. Okay. We could end up with a really dark green. Like, I've got these darker colors here, and I'm not sure. I'm gonna blend this real quick, so while the ink is still kind of dry, while the ink is still kind of wet, I'm gonna blend that line a little bit. So keep your markers handy. Keep your light markers handy. The light markers kind of become like a blending tool. As you progress into darker colors, you can always revert back to a lighter color and just kind of blend everything together. because you're not really, even if you're adding a lighter ink, you're not really going to damage, you're not going to really change the color of everything. But what you are going to do is just kind of blend everything together. Oops. So we'll come here, we'll do some shadow underneath this. Shadow, some shadow, shadow underneath the flowers again. And we'll come back in and blur it all together. That's pretty good. Progressively getting darker. We never really just go straight for that darkest marker. The darkest markers are much less forgiving. So when we put down a bunch of ink first, it allows us to kind of mix in those darker colors, and it's just more forgiving. Like you can go, if you add a really dark color to an area that has really wet ink, but you decide you don't like it, you can actually kind of lighten it up a little bit, just a little bit. But if you did that with dry ink, like once the ink is dry, you're not going to really get any lighter. So you want to make sure that you're going to do any corrections and try to make the ink lighter. You really got to do it while it's wet. So spend some time, pick your colors properly. The more time you spend up front kind of planning everything, the easier everything else will be along the way. Got this dark over here. Maybe add shadow under there. Shadow, shadow underneath. Shadow underneath, and then blur it. Come in with my lightest green gray and just try to blur it. So I want to blur it like right after I put down the darker color. And that's while it's still as wet as it can be. The longer I wait, the more it dries. The more it dries, the harder it is to blend. So let's get into the habit of trying to work it back right away. But be quick, because this ink is drying. Everywhere I'm not putting ink down, it's drying. Okay, mix it in again. And we're going to go through this probably 2 more times if I had to guess. Just kind of picking finding the dark areas and working them in. I've got my light color. So even though I'm just kind of like looking around, I always want ink going down on the paper. Like always. I'm even just kind of getting wet. I'm stirring it through. I'm filling in any like small little blank gaps that I might have missed. But I'm really just constantly putting ink down, and that is going to help keep the paper wet, especially when you're working in these large areas, with large areas like I am right now. Okay. Pretty good. Come underneath here. Here. Kind of revisit some of these shadow areas. And we'll just slowly kind of keep coming back and forth. And before you know it, we'll be adding a little bit more contrast with each pass. You can always take a look at the other side of your paper and kind of see what it's looking like. Like, okay, it's been I've gone over this area much more than that area right there. I'm going to switch my lightest green gray to that second one that was working. And that's just to kind of keep the colors a little bit different. And then I'm going to go to the second. I'm going to bring in this color, the second one in this palette. And I'm going to kind of work this color, work these 2 colors together. So this one and this one. And these colors are meant to go together. I prefer Ohuhu markers. I find that, well, number one, I think that they're very affordable. You know, it's about $1 a marker, depending on the set size you get. But if you go with like Copic markers, I mean, you're paying like $5 a marker. It really adds up a lot when you're trying to have a set of several hundred markers or whatever. But also Ohuhu just like has a ton of colors. And I love that. I just love all the colors. It's fun to organize. It's fun to kind of go through and pick your palette and it's just more to work with. You don't need all the colors to do a good drawing, but it certainly helps. The only problem with my technique is, since I kind of use the lighter colors as a blender, we kind of use the light colors a lot, and so the light colors run out of ink much quicker than the dark colors do. And so you end up kind of having to replace these sets, and you're really just replacing the lighter colors. And you end up accumulating a lot of the darker colors just because you just don't use them quite as often. And the ink of darker colors goes much further away, so you don't need as much of it. So these light colors, you're just going to kind of go through them with this technique. Now you can blend from dark to light. I think it's less forgiving. I know it's a little bit quicker and it uses slightly less ink, but it's just, like I said, it's less forgiving. And I really, like, I've done it both ways, and I really, really prefer going light to dark. Even though it takes a little bit more time and uses a little bit more ink, I think it's worth it. So each one is getting kind of its own unique color with a slightly different combination of green grays. And again, keeping that paper nice and wet. Coming through these leaves that stick out the most. Kind of darker towards the stem and towards the center of the leaf. With these markers, I don't have a brush tip. I only have the chisel tip, and that's fine. The chisel tip is more for pushing ink. It's not as good at blending. It's more good at like getting ink out of the way. So if I went too dark, I could come in with my chisel tip on a lighter marker and really kind of force that light ink onto the paper. You can really lighten it up that way. Just be careful that you're not pushing too hard because you might actually damage the paper. And it's just it never really blends quite as well compared to the brush tip. But there's definitely an application for the chisel tip. Going through here, this is looking pretty good. Come up, do some of these. Get these wet with the lightest one. It's been a little while since I visited these leaves right here, I think. So when in doubt, you can always just put down a little bit more ink. I mean, you want to be careful not to oversaturate the paper, but I am using 60-pound paper. Now regular printer paper is 20 pounds. And I think that's just a little bit too thin. With the thinner paper, well, the advantage is it doesn't require as much ink to saturate. So you will use more ink. You'll use more ink on a thicker piece of paper. But you've got less time to work. You gotta mix those colors a little bit quicker. The ink dries a little bit faster because the paper's thinner. And it's a little bit less forgiving. So I really like the 60-pound paper. I really think it's the way to go. I've gone with I've tried 110 as well, and that's actually too heavy. You end up using a lot of ink, and you end up it tends to bleed quite a bit on those papers too. But acid-free paper. Work the shadow out. Constantly coming back and forth. Got a shadow underneath this leaf right here. Maybe a little bit behind it. Work it out. Add the dark. Stay with the light. Blend it. Come up here. It's going to be a little bit of a shadow here, but these ones are going to be exposed to the light mostly, so they'll be fairly lighter. Make this one a little bit darker. Make that a little bit darker. Kind of bring it up through the center of the leaf. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And then add your color, and then come back in with the lighter color, and just fade it right away. I don't want to risk like putting the darker color down and saying, "Oh, I'm gonna come back and fix that," and then I just kind of forget about it because there's so many different leaves. I'm just gonna kind of do batches. I'll do like 5-6 leaves at a time. Add in more shadow. Add some shadow to this one. And you know what? I am going to switch to my next set of green grays. Okay, so I'm not going darker. I'm coming to these guys right here. And I think that this will just help keep the colors a little bit different. So kind of just jumping around from leaf to leaf, adding my darker colors. I'm gonna bring in the third darkest, the next darker color for this round, and we'll start working in some more shadows here. So I go with the dark when I add a new marker. I go with the darkest spot with the darkest marker, and then I kind of work my way back to the light. So now I grab my second darkest marker, and now my third darkest marker, or in this case my lightest marker. Okay, and just keep doing that. Keep doing that. Work the shadows. Add contrast by working the shadows a little bit. We can always go darker. We can always darken up a light area. Can't really lighten up a dark area. So where was that? Right here. Okay. See, I kind of branched away from these leaves I was doing initially, and then I almost forgot which leaves they were because they all look alike. And just gradually as you go, you're adding a darker color with each step, each stage. You're adding a slightly darker color. So the whole thing is just going to kind of get darker and darker and darker as you go. And with each dark marker, it becomes slightly less forgiving because those dark markers are a little bit harder to get rid of than the light colors if you mess up, which you are going to mess up. And the question is, how do you handle it? Like, what do you do when you mess up? And so one thing you can, a couple things you can do to prevent messing up. Work with wet ink. Add your darkest color to the darkest area where the ink is wet, and you will have a good time. You will be able to correct it. You'll be able to go darker. You'll be able to blend it in. But don't add a dark color to a really dry area and then try to blend it. It's just going to be a lot more difficult. Kind of working my way back and forth here between these markers. Yeah, I'm just kind of going leaf by leaf right now. Still just getting everything wet, keeping everything wet. I'll go with this leaf right here. Add some shadow. Okay, keep this dark. This leaf looks like it hasn't been touched in a while. Let's see, let's put some shadow underneath the rose. Yeah, that's pretty good. Maybe a little darkness up the stem. And then fade it back here. Alright, keep going around. I got too much light right there. Let's see. Looks pretty good. It's going darker and darker and darker. I mean, I might even step it up to another dark gray. Let's see. So the side, so my left side of the leaves will be a little bit darker than my right side because the light is coming from the right. Working that shadow. Let's double check your colors. Sometimes you accidentally grab the wrong color. It's really easy to do. Just try to keep your markers organized or like know what the cap looks like. Coming dark. Just follow up the stem. Just make it a little bit darker towards the center of the leaf. And we'll fade these guys out a little bit in a second. Okay. Oh, I missed the leaf entirely over here. Oh, I missed another one. Okay, come back in with my second marker. Start to fade that darkest one. Now I'm still debating. Do I want to add one of these legit greens, or do I just want to keep it all the gray? I kind of like the gray, but the only problem is that when I get to the roses won't be red gray. They'll probably be a mixture of red gray and red. So I think I want to kind of do something similar with the leaves. Do like a mixture of green gray with green. So I think those leaves actually look pretty good. I'm going to come in with my lightest color, and we're just going to do a sample area, okay? We're just going to test. I'm going to test the kind of dark area, maybe like right here. Let's see, if I come here and I add some of this green to the light areas, that actually looks pretty good. Okay, I think I'm going to go with this one. I don't need a ton of ink to get rid of, to make it look, to make that color pop, okay? I don't need a ton of ink. It's just gonna mix in with the wet ink that's there, and it's gonna just appear slightly more green. Slightly more in the highlight areas. Okay. It's going over all the leaves with this. See, I've already established... Oops, excuse me, sorry. See, I've kind of already established different colors by using the different green grays. So it's okay to go over everything with the same color, as long as it's a light color, and it will still, those colors will still be slightly different from the green grays. So I'm basically mixing in this one ink, even though this ink is going to be the same, where I'm mixing it everywhere. But I'm mixing it into different wet inks that are slightly different tones. But yeah, I am kind of digging this color. It's very subtle. Like I want it to be mostly gray. Mostly gray. Keep coming through. I can tell my paper is really wet because it's starting to warp, which is great for adding darker colors. You just got to be careful that you don't oversaturate. You can damage the paper. You can fill up you can put so much ink down that it's fully saturated and no more ink can go down. So sometimes you just got to step away and let the ink dry a little bit. But in this case, since I'm working such a large surface area, I'm not too worried about it drying up on me or oversaturating on me. It's saturated right now, don't get me wrong, but it's not like I can wring it out. Coming back, I think I've already done these leaves, but that's okay. We'll do another pass. You want to make sure that if you're using a printer, some inks some printer inks bleed a little bit. So, in my experience, it actually depends more on the paper and not the ink itself. So you might want to try a couple different types of paper. You know, like I said, 60-pound paper is probably the way to go. 50, 60 pounds. But you want to make sure that you get something where the printer ink isn't going to bleed into your picture. I think that's pretty good, actually. I think I'm gonna call that good. I don't really want to go much darker. It's already pretty dark just from the coloring itself, because they kind of included the gray areas there, or the dark. They included shadows in the line art. So I don't really think I need to go to a darker green. I think I'm pretty good right there. And I think I made a good choice of just sticking with this color, because I think it's mostly gray, but at the end of the day, there's still a little bit of green in there. So I'm going to call that good for the leaves. I think next we'll work on the maybe on the stone, or maybe on the flowers. I haven't decided yet. So I'll switch cameras and stay tuned. Okay, now I'm going to do the background, so kind of beneath the flowers and kind of above the flowers. Now, I was originally thinking kind of doing like a blue sky for this, but you know what? We're kind of looking down at this rock. It doesn't really make sense that there's going to be sky, so what I'm going to do is going to stick with the grays, and I'm going to use a warm gray, which kind of looks like a brownish color, and we'll fill this in. I kind of want it to look like dirt, and then so I've selected these grays right here, and then we'll mix in some actual browns afterwards. So I'm gonna get it wet with the grays, and let's get going. There's some like little spaces here and there. I'm just starting with a light marker per usual. I'm gonna end up coming back over all this, especially in these shadow areas. Just getting going with the lightest marker per usual. Oh, it looks like I missed a leaf right there. So always just kind of keep your markers close. Like I missed the leaf and I have this green gray right here. Like I have it ready to go. I leave my markers kind of in piles, and I don't put them away until I'm completely done with the drawing usually. Just for instances like that where I miss a little area, or I have to go back and make like a little adjustment, or maybe I want to go darken the colors, something like that. I just want to have my markers ready to go. Especially like if you put away your markers, you might not remember exactly which one it was. You can't just say, oh, it's a red marker. Well, guess what? There's like 30 different shades of red. So just keep track of what markers you use. It'll just make your life a little bit easier later, because you are going to make mistakes. I mean, like, everyone makes mistakes. I think like every artwork has mistakes in it. Whether you see them or not, there's probably some areas of each piece of art that the artist didn't exactly intend it to come out that way, but they made a mistake and then they just kind of worked with it and they worked it back into the drawing itself. And that's kind of what I kind of think like art, like I said, it just kind of molds itself. You might have like a vision for one thing, but it might come out slightly different from what you intended, and you just kind of have to make adjustments on the go. So, but you have to kind of learn to work with yourself and understand like where you might make those adjustments. like I've said, you can always go darker. So when I did these green grays for the leaves, I didn't use the darkest green gray. I went to like a medium dark. I can always go a little bit darker with the greens if I want to come back. I can't go lighter, especially now that it's dry, but I can go darker. But I'm gonna do everything else, and then that'll kind of like set the tone. So I want to make sure that this dirt kind of goes with the leaves. Like the dirt's not too light, it's not too dark. Because right now this color I'm putting in right now, it's too light. But that's okay. Anytime we put down a layer, I basically want to go over it at least twice. I never want to just go over an area once with one marker. For a couple reasons. Number one, it's monotone if you go over it just one time. Second is it doesn't completely fill the paper entirely. Like if I use like a really dark marker, like I'm doing like a night sky, and I go in with a dark marker, it'll be kind of whitey, like white patches here and there, and I want to just go over it a couple times and just makes it more smooth. Okay, now I'm stepping it up to WG070, which is a darker one. My second darkest, or second lightest, I should say. And I'm going to go over everything here at the bottom, I think. I want to go darker than the original color that I put down. But this is mixing in with that layer that I just put down of that previous marker. And so this will lighten up just a tiny bit when it mixes with that one color, with that gray that I just put down. Gotta find all these little areas that I hid. Yeah, I think this warm gray is a really good color for this. I always keep a sheet underneath. If you look over on the other side, you can't see it bleeds through. I find the sheet underneath, I mean, it'll protect your table, but it also kind of like absorbs some of the extra ink. So the ink kind of has a way to go if you accidentally put down too much ink. If you have a piece of paper underneath, it will kind of like absorb a lot of it. So I'm actually going to try to, I think what I'm going to do here is try to fade this warm gray into the gray I just did. I like this color gray for the very top, but I think it needs to kind of fade into it. So put down some layer here, and we'll just work it back up into that color. So got the paper wet here, very light right here, light. A little bit here, and then let's come back to that original color and let's just kind of work it back and forth. So we'll do a few different layers here, working it in. There we go. Let's work it back up, and we'll generally, this top area will just get a little bit darker and darker as we go, pulling that dark ink up into the paper. Grab my lightest color. Let's go all the way to the top this time. So now we're really getting everything wet, and we'll have a nice blend towards the end. I'm not sure if I'm going to mix in these browns. I probably will, but I'm going to wait until the very, very end because I really want the paper to be wet, because I just want like a slightest bit of that brown. I really want this thing to stay in these gray tones. And these grays actually go pretty well together. Like the blue gray complements the green gray quite well. It complements the yellow gray. Even though you can't really blend them together because they're so different, just kind of the general tone of them, I think it works pretty well. So now I got my paper wet. You can still kind of see like a line. So let me work this back in here. Let me get it a little saturated towards the bottom here. Bottom of this top section, so we get a little bit more saturated. And then we can kind of pull that ink up a little bit. So this is a good working size area. Like the amount of space that I'm working with, it's big enough that I'm not going to oversaturate and just like drench my drawing with ink. But it's not big enough that like it's going to be dry by the time I finish one end. So I just went over the whole thing. It probably took me, I don't know, 20-30 seconds or something like that. And in that time, the ink will dry a little bit, but not too much. So you always just kind of want like a happy somewhere between like dry and saturated. There's a happy medium. And that's kind of what I'm going for right now. So it just helps you blend if it's slightly wet, slightly damp. You don't want it oversaturated. But that usually takes like, I don't know, 6-7 layers of ink on a 60-pound piece of paper, which is what I'm using right now. Blend that up. Now what I don't like is kind of this area right here, so I'll throw in a little bit of the darker one, and then immediately come in and try to blend it back. And that's blending away pretty well. So I can let this dry for a little bit, and it's important to like come and check in on it while it's drying. I'm not just going to let it dry 100%, but right now I want to see what it's going to look like as it dries. Like how is this fade going to look? Is that transition from the darker gray to the lighter gray going to look good? And you know what? I'm actually going to come in and throw in some of the this brown that's more matches this. This is cocoa brown. I'm just going to throw in a little bit of it. So little bits here and there. And then we'll fade it in. So I'm just kind of blurring it around little spots. The ink is nice and wet, so this is a really good time to do this. And we'll just blur this all together. Coming back in with my lightest gray. So that light gray kind of becomes a blender once the ink is wet and a little bit darker. So right now I'm using it as a blender. Try to pull up some of that brown that we just added in. Just kind of fade it all together. Doing my best not to get the flowers wet or colored. Gotta be careful, it's bleeding a little bit right here. So once you add more ink, the paper becomes more saturated, and the ink will start to bleed through the lines. So that's one of the problems with oversaturating the paper, is that the ink will bleed. You gotta be particularly careful with that when you're working in a small area. Like if I'm doing like a small little face, it's easy. You want to go and you want to mix in like 10 different colors. It's really easy to accidentally oversaturate it really fast. Just gotta be careful. All right, let's come back in with the bottom here. I don't know how much I like that fade. I'm gonna keep an eye on it, but I'm gonna work the bottom right now. And I'm just gonna go straight to that WG70, that second one we were using. And I think the whole bottom will be this color. I think this will become my new base color for the bottom. I think that WG50, the first one that I did, it's just a little bit too light. But your images always end up a little bit darker towards the end than when you start. You always just kind of start light, and it just gives you an idea of what you're working with. It's the experimental phase. So now I got about 1.5 layers of ink right now, so it's it's gonna dry in a minute or so probably. So I'll just keep coming back and adding a little bit more ink. I always want to keep my marker moving a little bit. Just when in doubt, just add a little bit more ink here and there, as long as you're not working in a super small area. And I'm gonna add in that brown now. I know I'm gonna work this area a little bit more, so I'll be able to blend this brown in a little bit better. I'm not filling in 100% of the spaces with this brown. Since it's kind of wet ink, and I know I'm going to be going back over it, I'm just going to kind of put down a little bit of it, and then I'll blur it together with this. And it's okay if it's a little bit patchy. Like, you don't want it to be monotone. So even if I'm just kind of spreading the ink out, it's okay that the ink isn't like perfectly spread out even. It looks better. It looks more natural if it kind of like there's slight variances as you go. Alright, let's add in a darker gray. So let's go with this one, WG090. And I'm going to start in the darkest areas, so I'm going to try to find some shadows. So my light source in the upper right hand corner, because I'm right-handed. And I'm just going to add in some shadows behind and underneath the leaves. This whole area, like, you're really not even going to notice it when it's all said and done. It's just background. So because it's background, it's just more forgiving. Like, people aren't really going to notice it when you're working this part of the drawing. And I tend to, so I can, for that reason, I kind of consider it an easier part of the drawing. And I like to work kind of the easier parts of the drawing before I get into the thick of things. So like the heart in the center, I think is going to be pretty tough just because I want it to be like a kind of a lighter gray. Lighter colors are more difficult to work with. They're a little bit less forgiving. So I think that's pretty good for the gray at the bottom. I don't like this transition. I think I need a little bit more brown in the top here. So I'm going to go over the top with that lightest gray again. Just get it wet. Because if I go in with that brown towards the top, it's going to dominate. And I don't want that. I just want a little bit of that brown. And so I'm just going to get this area wet. And then I'm just going to throw in little bits of that brown. And then I'll try to like blur it in. And I can always add more of the brown, but I can't really add less since it's kind of a darker color than the area that I'm working right now. Alright, gotta be careful here. Yeah, this is gonna change colors pretty quickly. And sometimes you just gotta you can't really, you have certain limitations. I mean, like, I've got a lot of markers, but I don't have infinite markers. I can combine colors, I can get most colors that I'm trying to get, but sometimes you have to kind of just accept the fact that there are limitations to the markers that you have. And in this case, I'm going slightly darker than I kind of want to, but that's just because it's kind of the colors that I have. Try to work this in a little bit. So now this is all becoming kind of monotone towards the top, which I don't like. I really don't like. So now I'm really working this top area, try to work in that brown we just added, just keep adding more layers. And work it out. Okay, that's pretty good. Let me get some of these areas wet and we'll come in and add some more shadow. So I can't really, I went a little too dark at the top, but what can we do to, in case we go too dark in one area and we want to make it lighter, but we can't make it lighter, what you do is you make other areas around it slightly darker. I'm going to come in, let's add some shadow behind these leaves right here. Okay. I've got a darker gray than this, but we just step into it. We typically don't like to go from 0 to 100. We like to step it up in small increments. Small changes at a time. So I'm going to come back in with the darker gray now and kind of work some of this work some of these shadows a little bit more. Start with the darkest area. Whenever you bring in a darker marker, always go to the darkest area of your drawing and add it there first. See what it's going to look like, and then just work that to the lighter areas of the drawing. Yeah, this marker is pretty strong, but you know, right when I'm adding it, yeah, it sticks out quite a bit. But since I'm adding it into wet ink, I'll be able to blur it in pretty easily. I know no one's really going to watch these videos, but you know what? It's okay. It's fun for me. I'm doing these drawings anyway. I like doing films. And who knows? You know what? This is a really fun hobby. I wish more people knew about it. Wish more people were into it. It's actually pretty easy. It's not that hard. I mean, like, yeah, it requires a little bit of practice, but I really genuinely feel like anybody can do this. Like, it's one thing to draw out all these flowers. Like, that requires a certain skill, but just to color stuff in really isn't too bad. Alright, I'm going to call that good for the dirt. We will go ahead and do the stone next. Okay, next let's do the heart. So I want to stay with the gray tone. basically what I'm going to do is, well, I suggest printing off a practice sheet, and that's what I've done here. And this is kind of what I'm going to go for. It'll kind of be like two different tones to the rock, to the stone. Basically, everything is going to share these palettes. So this first gray here, I'm going to use throughout the entire thing. And I want to use those same markers because it kind of brings the colors together. I don't want to do a completely separate color for the center section and a different color for the outside. But what I am going to do is mix in some cool grays into the center section and then mix in some warm grays to the outside. So it will change up the color a little bit. I might also throw in this brownish color to the outside to complement the warm grays. So let's start with the lightest colors. So everything is going to share, this is called T0, it's a Copic marker. Everything is going to share these T's. So let's just go over everything with this marker. Now my bright spot will be right where my marker is, and kind of a little bit over here, and it might kind of follow this kind of like a U shape. But we'll try to work in that light area as we go. So right now, since we're just doing the lightest marker, we're just going to go over everything. Sometimes I put a little more ink with the lightest marker, like where I think the highlight's going to be. But I'm just getting everything wet and just establishing a nice little base layer that I can work with layer. Okay, but not too much. I don't want to like oversaturate it. I'm just getting pretty much just one layer. All right, here's T1. So let's kind of work the darker areas first. And we'll just kind of work our way around the border. Again, everything is getting this color. We're sharing T0 through T2. It's going to be shared, so I'm just coloring the whole thing. And I kind of saved, like normally I would do the center of attention last. But I think the roses are going to be more difficult, so sometimes I save the more difficult sections for last. Also, the roses might kind of get away from the grays, and I wanted to kind of knock all the grays out together. So that's kind of why I'm doing this stone first, because the stone is mostly these grayish colors. With a touch of brown mixed in, but not much. Okay. Work that in. Let me come back. Let me step back to T1. Blend that in a little bit better. Come back in with T0. Try to blend all this center section together. Get it wet. All right, now let's go in with the cool grays for kind of the center section. So coming in with cool gray 0, so I can get everything wet because it's my lightest color. And this is when the colors will start to change a little bit. So it won't get darker, but the color will change ever so slightly. I can really I'm going to really drive into the lightest area right here and kind of work that highlight area I was showing you before. So I think we'll have a highlight kind of here, and then it kind of dips down. It'll fade a little bit, and then we got a highlight area here, which I'm saturating right now. Let's go to C1. So work our way around that. Now I'm not going into the dark area, so I'm staying in the center section. And just kind of working around that highlight area I just did. And then let's come to C2, and we'll just kind of work the outside section of the center. I think that's pretty good for the center. Let me come back in with C1 and just kind of blur that back in. And you know what, let's attack it with T2 again. T2 is my darker, the third marker I used for the initial pass. And let me come in with T0 and just kind of bring it all together. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Tell you what, I've got my blender marker. It's always good to keep a blender marker nearby, and I'm just going to hit the highlight area a little bit. So this will just brighten it up just a tiny bit, but it might be enough to make a difference. And maybe just kind of follow that path a little bit. Okay. That's pretty good. I got the paper pretty wet, so I don't really want to add any more. I mean, I probably just did like 9-10 layers. And if you look at the other side, you can actually feel it's wet through. So I might have put down a little too much ink, but that's okay. All right, so let's work the outside now. So I had everything, I'm gonna get everything wet with T2, which we've already used. So this will become my base color for the outside of the stone. That ink has dried up a little bit since I last worked it, since I was focusing on the center there for a little bit. So just getting wet again with T2, my lightest color. And then let's work our way up to, let's go T3 through 6. So start with the darker area. So this is T3. I always come to the darkest area, so away from to my left because my sun is on the right. And we'll just kind of work and we'll just step up the levels of shade. In fact, I think I might, yeah, that's pretty good. It'll be kind of light right there. Let me go one more layer of, let me go one step darker with this T color. So this is T4, starting in the darkest area. Yeah, now we're adding some shadow. Really adding curvature. Add some shadow behind that rose, that flower. Come here. A little more color there. Okay, I want to throw in, so I want to mix in some of this this light brown, and I'm going to do that now. Okay, I wanted to get the ink wet first because I don't want this color to dominate. I just want a little bit of it. And if you want just a little bit of it, you want to get the ink wet and then you just kind of like lightly mix it in. I'm not really pushing at all. I'm just grazing it right now. I'm gonna get a little bit of a brownish color. And that's all I want. I just want a slight change. I want it to look like this, like it's got an outside layer, like an outside peeling layer to the stone. That's pretty good. Let's come in with T5. So this is a step darker. Come to my darkest area. Work that darker area. Probably have a decent amount of shadow here. Shadow behind the rose. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm going to work in these warm grays now. So I'm going to go to my base color of warm gray 2. That'll be my lightest warm gray. And just very quickly go over the entire thing. Kind of blur some of those previous colors together. And we'll just kind of change the tone to this warm gray ever so slightly. And then we'll work in the darker warm grays where you'll actually kind of see it. Stepping into it, we're not going for the Hail Mary. So it's W3, so my warm gray 3, my second warm gray. Work in those shadows again. Work in the shades, start with the darkest area, work your way to the lightest. Okay, let's go W4. Darkest area first. Yeah, my paper's getting really wet. If your paper ever gets too wet, it's okay to just step to the side and just let it dry for a little bit. I'm gonna keep working this, you know, since I'm doing the filming and everything. But if you find that it's starting to bleed a little bit too much, or you might damage the paper, just let it dry for a few minutes and then just come back. That's what I would do. And then let's come in with T2, T3, that'll be kind of my base T color. And let's just, you know what, that might be too dark. Let me come in with T2. Try to lighten up that area I just went over. And we'll just kind of blur it all together a little bit. I don't want to blur it too much, especially because the paper's really wet, so it's really gonna fade, it's really gonna blur quite well. So I just want to kind of go over it quickly and just try to work out any lines that I might have. But I don't have too many lines. And I think that actually looks pretty good for the stone heart. So I'm going to call that good. And then we'll do the roses next. Okay, now I think we're ready for the roses. So before I go on to the roses, one thing I want to note is that you might notice that this paper, you can kind of see some shadows in it, and it's warped. I actually put too much ink down on this heart. I worked the area too quickly, and as it's dried, it's kind of warped on me. So I think the lesson here is just kind of pace yourself when you're working in a smaller area. Just allow the ink to dry a little bit as you go. So let's get going to the roses. So I'm going to do this in kind of two different sections. We'll start with our grays. So I've got my red grays here. And I'm going to do everything in red gray first. And I might even let it dry, or it'll be kind of dry by the time I get ready for the actual reds. I had selected these different colors, there are about 10 of them, and then I brought it down to 5. So I think a palette of 5 is usually a good amount. Between 3 and 5. 2 at absolute minimum. You never want to do just one color because it becomes monotone. But you can actually do a lot with 2 colors. And with 3 colors, you can do a tremendous amount. And then with 5 colors, you know, the sky's the limit. So let's get going. Just going to get everything wet with this first red gray. So just establishing the tone. We're going to see, I'm not really sure how dark I'm going to go. But that's why we've done the background first. Like we've got these green leaves, and they're gonna give us kind of like an idea of how dark we need to go with these roses. Like we can always go darker. If I accidentally go too dark with the roses, I suppose I can always go darker with the greens. I just don't want to because, you know, I've already done it and the ink is dried. But that's not to say that you can't go back and change it. You can always make the paper a little bit darker as long as you didn't completely oversaturate it with ink. Which doesn't happen too often, so get everything wet with this marker. And this red gray kind of looks like a warm gray almost. Like this is almost matching the sides of this stone. So I'm using the brush tip. I really like the brush tip more than the chisel tip. I just think the ink comes out a little bit quicker, a little bit more evenly. Sometimes with that brush tip, the chisel tip, excuse me, it kind of leaves some streaks. But this brush tip, a little bit more like a squeegee. I'm kind of like, the more you push down on it, it kind of squeegees out. So you can really control the flow just based on how hard you're pushing the marker down. So I'm putting moderate pressure right now. Not really thinking too much right now. Just getting these white areas wet. Establishing my base. And one thing you should be doing is you want to prepare for every single section. So I pull out my markers and I make a palette. And I don't always do that when I do it by myself. I mean, I'm doing this for the camera because it helps me explain things a little bit easier. But you want to make sure that you're just kind of ready to go and make sure that your markers have enough ink. Like this marker might kind of be running out of ink. But I've got my backup markers. I've actually got backups for most of my markers. Very convenient. So if I run out of ink, I don't have to go digging through like some box that's hidden in a corner to go find the next marker. Like I've got it pretty close nearby. So if it might take me 30 seconds to go find a new marker, and that's fine. That's not much time. But you want to make sure that you're working with the wet ink. So like once the ink hits the paper, you really want to try to finish the section before you want to try to do it all in one go is what I'm trying to say. You want to work with the wet ink. So just be prepared. Okay, that's pretty good for this color. Come back over it. This one's more. Yeah, I think I like this. It does look pretty close to that kind of warm gray that we did earlier. All right, now I'm going to jump up. Let's go color. So light will come from my upper right. So we'll work the darker areas first. And this is not nearly as dark as we're going to go. So I'm still going to cover most of the flowers with this color. And I think it's okay to be a little generous with the ink. So I got a lot of shadows here. I mean, unless it's really a highlight area, I'm pretty much going to hit it. And then we'll come back and try to blend it all together. See, I think with the camera rolling, I'm kind of rushing some areas a little bit. I mean, you definitely want to work fast with the wet ink, but you don't want to rush it. I mean, like, it's not a race, and you know, the ink does take a little while to dry. And you know, if you need to buy yourself more time, just go over with a layer of a lighter ink, like a blender marker, and you just buy yourself more time that way. But working on paper that's dried isn't the end of the world either, and that's going to happen to us here because there's so many flowers here. Yeah, that's totally fine. So you want to experiment with combining inks that have dried up a little bit. So like, it will fade differently into ink that's slightly dry versus ink that's like very, very wet. Basically, if the ink is more wet, the more it's going to fade and the more it's going to blur. It'll just kind of blur naturally if it's really saturated, which is kind of nice sometimes. I mean, sometimes you want a sharp line if you're working like kind of a tighter area. You want like a bit more of a shadow line. But most of the time, we just want a general fade, and we can usually accomplish that with the wet ink. Kind of lost track of which flowers I've worked on. I think I've already done that one. Some of these darker areas. And we're basically going to be doing since we're going to kind of do this twice, once with the grays and once with the reds, you're going to kind of get 2 layers of shading. And it should actually look pretty cool when it's all said and done. I like to kind of do 2 layers of shading because then it just doesn't look, I mean, not monotone. Obviously, it's not monotone, but it just gives it like not this nice linear blend. Sometimes you want like a non-linear blend. We'll see what it looks like. I really don't know. I mean, like, I'm experimenting here. I'm just stepping it up, going slightly darker at a time. And most of these colors that you see right now, you're not going to see at all at the very end. But I'm just kind of forming it. I'm molding it into what I want it to be at the end. I'm not going straight for my darkest markers. I'm not going straight for the end result. I'm building up towards it. So right now it's just kind of like a good time to experiment with some different colors. Let's just get that whole thing wet. Yeah, it's a really good time to experiment. Try to establish some contrast going. Try to establish like where my tones or my shadows and stuff are going to be, and really try to turn these 2-dimensional objects into 3-dimensional objects. And then as you do that a little bit more, it actually gets a little bit easier to shade things because you can the objects start to take life, and it's a little bit more obvious like where the darker areas are going to be, and it just kind of gets easier as you go. Sorry, I realize this is going to take a while. No one said art was fast. This is not speed art. Shadows. I think that's all of them with this color. All right, let's step it up. Let's go one more. Let's go one darker. So I'm going to just try to work my way from the left up to the right. So now I'm adding a darker color. So when you add the darker colors, they will show up a little bit more in the final result. So each time I step it up to a darker color, I have to be a little bit more and more careful about how I add the ink. It's a little bit less forgiving. You're going to see it in the end result a little bit more. So I just got to be slightly more careful now. We can always go darker. We can fix mistakes. The mistake right now, I mean, we're still in the very early stages, don't get me wrong. But when you get to the darker markers, mistakes are harder to correct. I really suggest leaving your marker, like, I'm not sure if you can see it, but I kind of keep my markers in the same order as I put on the paper. And then like when I pull a marker, so these are my red grays, there's a gap right here. I had actually just pulled this from this gap, and it helps me keep everything in the order that I want it. Just bear with me here. Look in these small areas. I realize no one's really going to watch this, but you know what? This is just a lot of fun for me. I just really enjoy it. It's cool. I mean, you could just bring something to life. I think people kind of appreciate art. It's easy to show people. You can just pull out a picture on your phone and be like, hey, look what I drew. Okay. A little bit of shadow. Look on the bottom, a little bit of shadow there. Come on. And it doesn't have to be perfect. A little bit of unevenness actually kind of makes it look a little bit more natural. Sometimes you can, a shaky hand actually makes it look slightly more natural. So I try to be a little sporadic. Dark towards the center. Let this out. Darker towards this, yeah, towards the bottom of the leaves. Whole area is dark. Flowers are fun. I enjoy doing flowers. They just have a good, the colors just kind of fade on them really, really well. Just some good natural, just natural shading, natural tones. Come to the bottom of the bulb. So I'm always just kind of working the left area because that's where the darkest spot is. So I start with my darkest area and work my way to the lighter areas. So I know this is a time-consuming process, but it's just part of the journey. You have to do multiple layers. If you really want to get the shading down, you gotta do multiple layers. Those extra layers, I mean, keep the paper wet. Keep it blending. Keep it coming together. Let's get the inside of this a little bit darker towards the bottom. And what I'm going to do is after I do this, we'll take a step away and we'll just look at it from a distance and see, are these flowers starting to come to life? I mean, like how do the shadows look? Are the tones kind of match in the background? Am I gone too dark? Do I need to go darker? I think at a glance that actually looks pretty good. All right, let's go one darker. Same thing. Darkest areas first. Establishing some contrast. You get like a thin, like generally your darkest color. This isn't the darkest color that I plan. I do have a darker marker than this. Maybe it's the darkest one. But generally with your darkest marker, it ends up being a pretty thin shadow. And that darkest color really goes a long way. So now I'm really, even just a little bit, really makes the highlights pop. Let's see. So now I'm being extra careful. Yeah. Work my shadows. Yeah, flowers are fun. Just because they can flex and bend in so many different ways, and they can have so many natural colors. And it's actually kind of forgiving to work with a flower, because if you mess up the color a little bit, you just be like, oh, it's a slightly, you know, the who's to say that that shade of color doesn't exist in a flower in real life? Even if you're just off by a little bit. It's hard to hit like a target color, so oops, you know, this one is a little bit. Let me blur that a little bit. You know, I suggest having it's good to have a reference picture, but it's hard to try to copy the colors exactly as you see them. I mean, it's good to try to target that, but at the end of the day, you only have so many markers. And I mean, yeah, there are huge sets. I use the Ohuhu alcohol markers, and I probably have like 600 unique colors, but still, there are probably thousands of colors that our eyes can see. And yeah, you can kind of try to combine them together, but if you can't like if you can't match a reference drawing perfectly, like that's totally fine. Just it's all about kind of comparing the colors together. Like, what does this color look like next to that color? How dark am I going? And for that, the colors don't have to be perfect. I don't know. Experiment with it. Have fun. Make mistakes. You actually learn from your mistakes quite a bit. At least I have. Like, I made a mistake here. Like, I did too many layers on this heart, and you know, it's a mistake that I made before. I'll probably make it again. Putting too many layers of ink down and not letting it dry. What I probably should have done when I was doing this is, since I was stepping it up from T0 to T1 to T2, I really should just skipped one. I should have gone like T0 to T2 to T4, and then maybe worked in the middle colors if I needed to. It's also important to just keep in mind, like, what people are really going to see. Like, when you show this to somebody, like, what's the first thing that they're going to see? It's going to be just the general picture. Oh, that's a stone heart and a pile of leaves and flowers. Okay, that's cool. Is their attention really going to be drawn to, like, this very small section of this bulb? And the answer is probably no. So just be aware of, like, how important the thing is you're working on is, and how much is really going to stick out, and how much of an impact it's going to have on the general image as a whole. You're not going to get everything right, but you can make it all kind of go together and look good together. Oh. I'm just kind of talking out my ass right now. Sorry, this is very time consuming. Just skip forward if you're watching. Nothing to see here. A darker area first. pretty good. Maybe come back to the original color and just try to blur some of this together. Try to get rid of some of the lines. The ink is kind of dried on me a little. Oh, I think I missed that marker. Missed that flower, rather. So the inks have kind of dried on me. You know, I'm actually going to go around in the same order that I went before. And just go over it with the original marker. This will keep it wet for the for the red colors that we're about to add in. But this also just kind of brings everything together a little bit. Kind of brings it back to the original color, just a tiny bit. But like I said, it's small steps, it's small changes in ink as you go. We are very subtly changing the color of this ink as we go. Oh, I think I mixed my dark here. And I'm just double checking to make sure that I hit every area. As we've seen, I missed a couple flowers. I'm coming back and kind of double checking my work a little bit. Yeah, this marker, the tip it's got ink, but the tip is pretty smushed. You have to be careful with these brush tips. Yeah, you can push really hard, but you'll damage the brush tip. So I like to do moderate pressure generally, but yeah, this marker has definitely been used many times, and it's just not quite as sharp. And I'm really having to push a little bit harder to get the ink to come out. And then as I push harder, I do even more damage to the brush tip. So my tips generally run out or kind of break before I run out of ink. So sometimes I'll use the broad tip, the chisel tip. If I have the option to use either one, like it doesn't really matter in this certain scenario. Sometimes I'll use the chisel tip just to preserve the tip of the brush tip. But most of the time I just go to the brush tip. I would say that looks pretty good for the red grays. I didn't even use my darkest marker. You know what? I'm going to come in with the darkest marker. And let's just hit some like very fine highlight. Some reverse highlights as I call them. Just really bring out the shadows. Yeah, the darkest marker makes such a big difference. But like I said, it's less forgiving because it's harder to blur in. Once you add that dark ink, can't really revert back to a lighter ink too much. You can lighten it up as long as the ink is wet, but you can only go so far. And you can always go darker. There's always a black marker. There's always N7 and then N8. N7 is neutral gray 7, and I swear it looks like it's black. And then there's N8, and it's slightly darker. And there's N9, and then there's N10, and then there's black. You're like, how are there 4 different shades between N7 and black when they all look black? And then you put them next to each other, and you're kind of like, oh yeah, okay, I can see it. So a couple reverse highlights here. Now this marker, it's got a broad tip and it's got a fine tip. I almost never use the fine tip. I'm just using the corner of the broad tip. And I think the ink comes out a little bit more on the broad tip. Like it really doesn't come out very much on the fine tip. And I find the corner to be just as effective. So, and these highlights, these reverse highlights here. I like working in this larger area just because it paces me. I think it's like I'm not running into the issue of putting down too much ink. The ink is drying on me kind of as I'm going. Gave me enough time. So if you're working in a smaller area, you really gotta be mindful that you're not working too fast. I think I forgot to shade this one in the previous one. The previous marker. That's okay. Oh, I definitely forgot to shade this one. Let's go in with R150 and do this one real quick. You know, I might not have even done this for the previous marker before that. All right, so I'm going to go R150. Let's go back to the lighter color. So we're kind of doing like reverse here. Because normally I go lighter to darker, but now I'm kind of going darker to lighter. That's okay. You can do either one. It's just, I think it's easier to go lighter to darker. I think it's just less forgiving. Or it's more forgiving. Less likely to make a mistake. And that's pretty good there. It's easy to miss one. Okay. Yeah, I think bringing in the Starkest Red was a good idea. Really makes those highlights pop by adding more shadow. And you can see the ink lines up as it dries. So as I kind of go in a circle here, the ink is kind of drying as I return to my original position. And it lines up. Like, this ink is a different color than this ink. There's no doubt about it. And this one is more dry than this one. Okay, I'm going to call that good for... Oh, I don't think I did this one. The one right in the center. The most important one, probably. Okay, that's good. So I like the color, but it definitely needs a little bit of a red to it. So I'm not sure how red I want to go. Like I did with, oh wait, this one needs to be shaded a little bit here. So like I did with the leaves and the dirt, you know, I started with the grays and then I kind of added in normal colors and kind of got away from the grays. So now I've got red, gray, roses, and I'm basically gonna kind of shade it as if I were just doing white paper with these markers. But I don't know if I'm necessarily gonna go all the way to the darkest color, because each time we add another color, it's gonna get more and more red. And I don't know how red I want it to get. So it's actually shaded fairly well right now, but the color is just not quite right. So I'm gonna come in with the lightest color, and we can actually just go over everything as we normally would. So I'm just coloring in, just doing everything here. Check the other side of your paper, see how much you're actually going through. So yeah, it's pretty wet. You know, it's dried a little bit, but it's still damp. Kind of the way I like it. I could let, you know, it's fun to experiment with just different variables. You know, I could step away for 5 minutes right now, come back and try doing this. It might be a little bit safer if I'm afraid I'm going to warp the paper. I'm not too worried about that right now, though. I think I got a few more. I think at the pace I'm going, I'm adding more ink faster than it's drying, but not that much faster. Like, I can keep going at this pace, and I think it'll be fine. Yeah, I think this color is a good addition. I might even just do one more color one more of these reds and then call it a day. So the ink is slightly damp, so I'm able to blend it a little bit from what was there before, but those colors that were there before aren't going to change all that much. Like the shadows are going to remain where the shadows are. The highlights will mostly remain where the highlights are. And if you really want to lighten up an area, you can really push and just keep adding ink to a certain area if you want to make that more of a highlight. You can lighten the ink a little bit, not much, but enough to make a difference. You can also always use the blender marker. That lightens things up. But you gotta do that on wet ink. I think I already did these ones. And you can see the ink has changed color as I've gone in a circle because it started to dry on me. So it's gotten a little bit lighter. You can do it again. Alright, I like that color a lot. I think that color looks really nice. You know, I'm actually going to skip, you know, I got this color, but it's got like a tint of orange to it. Let's try adding a little bit here. This could be a good transition color. So just a little bit of this color, get a little bit extra life. So I'm gonna kind of do this color right here is kind of gonna go around this color. So it's gonna kind of, I'm not going from the total darkest area to the total lightest area. Yeah? No. Okay, so sorry, I got interrupted there. Coming in with this marker, kind of the area between the second and third gray. I'm just adding a little bit of it because it doesn't quite match. It doesn't quite match the tone that I'm going for. But I think a little bit of this marker will kind of help the other colors pop, and just a tiny bit. I don't know. I mean, we're experimenting. I don't know entirely if this is going to look all right. And if I really don't like this color at the end of the day, I can always go back and, you know, try to make it darker or mix it in with a different red, things like that. Do I add it to every leaf? I'm not sure. Maybe like every other one. I do think this is a good color. I like how this is looking. If you're not sure, take a step back and take a look at it from a distance. Let it dry for a little bit if you need to. Just because the ink dries doesn't mean you can't get it wet again. I mean, I talk a lot about keeping the wet ink. But it's okay if it dries on you. You can always just go back and make it wet again. But you might not be able to make it mixable. You might have to kind of mix some new colors, mix some new markers. Jeez. So just getting a little bit of color added to these still going to be mostly gray. I want this thing to be like 80% gray. Just small touches of red. Small amounts. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to come in with one more color, I think. I'm going to go with this dark pink, the third color. And oops, I missed this one. See, I'm always missing something. Oh, I missed this one too. So I'll come with this darker pink, and I think I'm gonna kind of like, oh shoot, this is, oh, I accidentally grabbed the wrong marker. See, that's why we kind of start in a darker area, and we can, yeah, see if I can work this out right here. Okay, crisis averted. I was able to work that out. And then this color is going to kind of complement that color I just added, I think. Just add it here and there in the dark areas. And basically what I'm doing with this marker, I'm not exactly shading it. I'm just kind of coloring it. I'm making it red. I'm choosing a red that goes with a certain tone of the shadows, basically. But I'm not doing everything with it. A little bit here, a little bit there. Yeah. Yeah, this is a good marker. I think this is the darkest I'm going to go. So this will probably be my last pass. I think for the whole thing, and then we'll call it done. Maybe coming with a lighter color, maybe. But it might not be necessary. But the last steps that you do are always going to kind of have the biggest impact on your drawing. So even though you might be getting kind of worn out, a little bit exhausted towards the end, I mean, we've been sitting here for a while now. Even though you get a little bit exhausted, you really want to pay the most attention towards the end. I mean, that's kind of game time. Right now we're in game time. We're doing the colors that are going to stick out the most. Kind of looks like I missed these leaves with the previous marker. Underneath. Just touch up the darker areas with this. Finding any spots that I missed. Almost done. You can just fast forward. I can't. I think what I need to do is set up like a, oh, what's that called? Where you take like one picture every minute or something. I forget what that's called. I think that might look kind of cool. You can really see the progress of these things. Kind of see how I work one section to another, and then how I kind of start light and get dark. How the shadows just kind of slowly come in. Alright, that's pretty good. Honestly, I think I'm going to call it good for this one. I'm pretty satisfied with it. I think it looks nice. I think the colors, like the The greens aren't too dark or light. The reds aren't too dark or bright. I think all the general tone of it goes together pretty well. I was worried that this top background was going to, you know, I'd be better off going with the blue. But it looks to me like I think it's fine with this kind of dirt color. I think this actually looks pretty good. I just wish that my biggest regret right now, especially because this area is really white, is that the paper got warped and that I can kind of see shadows from my light that's over here. I can kind of see shadows in the waviness of the paper, because this color is actually pretty consistent, but from your point of view you can see some shadows and stuff. So we'll call that good. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.